Number 14 also does not have a line reference. This is just a huge problem on this test, but it's okay. We have the chronology rule. We know that the answer to number 13 was in these lines here. We had to look at the birthday thing, which is around line 21. So that's where we would expect to start to have to read for question 14. And we have question 15 tells us line 26. So that's not a lot of lines. But that's where we should start to look, is somewhere in between here is probably where the answer to question 14 is going to be. That's the chronology rule. And sure enough it is, and honestly here you could have skimmed for this information instead of just using the chronology rule, because we're using a very distinctive phrase, transactive memory, and we did see that for the previous question on 19 and 20. So we know where to find this information. But the other thing that's important about this question is it's not actually asking about information in the lines. This is a hypothetical situation, right? Which of the following would be considered a transactive memory source? So we need to bring something to the passage. There's nothing about souvenirs or websites or libraries or travel in the lines. That's not what we're checking. We're used to checking that kind of stuff, but this is a hypothetical where we need to compare these new examples to the example that's already in the passage. And when we have to do stuff like that, your best bet is to make a dumb summary of what's going on so that you can turn all the complicated stuff in the lines into a very simple version of itself that you can then compare to the choices. So let's try to do that. We already read about the husband's, here it is, the transactive memory source exists in many forms, as when a husband relies on his wife to remember a relative's birthday. So the husband does not remember the birthday, but he knows his wife remembers it. So that's one example. The other that they give us in this quote is, it is this whole network of memory where you don't have to remember everything in the world yourself, he says, you just have to remember who knows it. So, you don't remember, someone else does. And that's a long, dumb summary. I usually like to keep it down to like 2 or 3 words tops, but I don't know how to condense that one. So that's what we're going to go with. But here's the thing, is it's still not that complex. I'm not really talking about birthdays. I'm not trying to get specific. I'm trying to be as general as possible because I know that these examples aren't going to be the exact same thing that we saw in the lines. So now let's look and let's see if we can find similar ideas from our dumb summary to these examples. A souvenir bought home from a memorable trip. Okay, so I don't remember the trip, but the souvenir does. If a souvenir remembers the trip for me. It doesn't seem quite right. A souvenir, like a gift you bought for yourself, that doesn't remember the trip for you. It might remind you of the trip, and then you have to rely on your own memory for it. But that seems kind of weird. A souvenir isn't, telling you about the trip. Maybe a photo album would be, but that's not what we're talking about. So that doesn't seem right. B, a written list of a user's passwords for different websites. Okay, so I don't remember the passwords. The list remembers them for me. That's close. That's pretty good. It's not a person. It's a list. So that's a little different. But again, I'm not remembering the thing. Something else is doing the remembering for me, and I just need to check the list in the same way that that husband needs to check with his wife for the relative's birthday. That's got a lot of connections. Now, of course, I wouldn't just pick this because it's not a perfect match. There's some differences too, but there's a lot of checks, right? So I would be like, okay, this is looking pretty good. Let's see if any other choice has more checks. C, a library database that helps users locate specific books. Well, I'm not remembering where the book is. Like, that's not how a library, that's not what you do at a library. You're not like, oh, I'm not going to remember where all these books are. The database is doing that for me. Like, I guess that's kind of like it, but the thing that I'm remembering, like, I would have never remembered the location of the book in the first place. Whereas the password is something, right, that I came up with, that I wrote down so that I wouldn't have to keep it up here. It's not like I know where all the books are and then I made the database so that I didn't have to keep it up here either. The only way I know anything is through the database. So this one maybe has 1 or 2 checks, but I still like the choice B better. That has more connections with this husband-wife example. And then let's look at D, a website that helps users plan and make travel arrangements. Well, that has nothing to do with memory at all, so that doesn't seem right. So B and C are kind of memory related. The difference, though, is B is much more about memory, right? I need to remember my passwords, so I write them down. I'm not really going to a library with some sort of memory of where the books are. That's a bit more of a stretch, and I don't want to have to stretch things. Even though these are all different examples from what's provided in the passage, I want to have it as tight as I possibly can, and so if I have to do too much work to get something to fit, it's probably wrong. It should be much more fluid and seamless about how the things match. B fits much more perfectly, and so that's why that's the answer here. So I think the dumb summary absolutely helps us. There aren't going to be a lot of these hypothetical questions on your SAT, but maybe 2 or 3, and you just got to approach them with this kind of mindset, and you can get them right, even though sometimes they are kind of hard because they are not actually things that are said in the line. So these are a little different than our usual process of elimination, but dumb summaries get us the answer all the same.